because he's right, he's legal, it's my property, it's my line. Do I have the right to come back and see you guys and say, hey, I cannot sleep at night? Those people next door, they boogie all the time.
If there's any issue with intrusion onto your property, whether it's noise or light, you have recourse either with the Town of Camden Police Department or the code officer. We are here to listen to your concerns regarding the project as it's on the plans.
Okay.
We can't control if somebody's violating a noise ordinance or.
No,
a light ordinance.
that's not what I'm saying.
So-
Eaton, that's not what I'm saying. I said, right now, they agreed to put some green by Michael's place, which I haven't seen yet, but they could agree with me to put some more, continue that line, and we're done with. It's not a question of noise or anything like that. I don't know what 5 years from now we do. That's all.
Right. So.
Just a little considerate.
So are you making a specific request to extend or have some
I would appreciate
buffer?
it could be agreed to continue this green thing where it's by Michael, you know.
If you look on the staff packet, it has the actual recorded site plan
Yeah.
that was approved, and it shows the adjacent property more clearly than maybe some of in the application packet.
I mean, I think I got it right here.
He's-
Right, this
this is
buffer.
who spoke
But
to,
so.
and this is Now,
So
It's
we're
right
looking-
at the
We're looking
corner.
at this buffer here,
I think these people. are-
and are you suggesting that it be brought along to your property as well?
Not on that corner, that's Jeffrey, okay? I'm only concerned right now, me. In other words, Michael is just at the corner, I like him to continue by me. Now, if Jeffrey feels the same way, that's all
I
right.
understand he's there, so he's asking to extend, you're asking to extend this buffer along your property line?
That's right.
Okay. And did you participate in the initial public hearing on this project?
Unfortunately, it was last winter and I was not around.
Okay. All right.
I guess I'd like to, since that was a specific thing that he added, the thing that the 55 feet further around the corner of my property means that I would love a consideration of green buffer turning north along my property also. So if you shoot like a corner of it instead of a single leg, I guess would be an official request that would kind of, because before the houses weren't going to go very around the corner behind me, they were only on the south side. So now if there was a longer green buffer to
Right, the both corner, that's it.
Right. Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And thanks for coming in.
Certainly.
Is there anyone else who would like to offer any non-agenda item public comment? Well, it's good to get it in, so. All right,
Hang on, Jeffrey, I have something to say.
you're all set? Okay.
That's a great joke.
Yes.
Well, I'm saying, I was looking for the revision and Bernard was had it the whole time, because this is dated for May of 24, and this is the amended one. That's all, yeah, that's July, so yeah, I was looking at July, but this one was a revision of May 22nd, 2020.
If you're looking to give public comment, you need to come up to the podium.
Oh, I just wanted to see the new proposal of the extension.
Okay, well, I'm going to proceed with the actual meeting then, unless you would like to make a comment.
Yeah. Well, the revision here,
Sir, this is not an opportunity to converse with everybody and decide what you want to do. It's a time to make either public comment, and I'd be happy to have it. We're not trying to exclude you, but we do have a meeting to go to.
no problem.
Okay. Thank you. All right. With that done, we will now move on to no approval of minutes today,
Okay,
right?
right, no moves.
And so now we're on to the application for subdivision amendment. Chapter 235, Article 12, revisions to approved plans. I'm going to have Shenley from the planning
Right.
department.
Okay,
give us a rundown?
Yep.
Gentlemen, I'm going to have to ask that you not converse while we're trying to conduct the meeting here. Yeah, it's fine. You can take it outside if you want to talk about it.
All right, as you know, this is an application for a subdivision amendment to approved plan. This was a plan that was approved back in June of 2023, and it's a major subdivision. It's an open space subdivision, so it's a little different than a regular subdivision, as you're allowed to cluster the units closer together and preserve some of the natural features of this site. And usually, if there's any minor changes after the plan has been approved, like during construction, if something comes up, like there's rocks or ledges or anything, it's normal to have alterations and minor modifications to the site. That's just part of development. This came to staff's attention because the road was being extended. It's being proposed to be extended a little further up the side of the property line to the north. I guess it's north. And it triggered a review to come before you. Normally it would go to staff and staff would do it in-house and pass it around members within the department and make sure everything's legit. But this particular one has to do with the buffer, the landscape buffer that's been brought up. That was a condition of your all's approval last year. So part of the approval process, you made a condition, and that's contained in that letter, notice of decision letter, that lists all the conditions. There's other conditions on there as well, as like stormwater conditions, homeowner association conditions. There's lots of things in place to keep the development going as they proposed and addressed. We had a lot of issues. You had outside counsel or outside consultant to do the erosion control, and that was all worked out with the applicant, and that they've adhered to all that. They've done a great job so far on the construction, and staff has been out there repeatedly. They send reports in, and they've done a fine job of erosion control and everything doing their construction. But now this has just triggered to come before the plan board just because of the condition of approval, which is the landscape buffer. And then I think originally that was put there, might have been because there was septic. Was there a septic tank or subsurface water system that was proposed to go there? And so that buffer was offered by the applicant as a way to mitigate any future negative impacts that might have, on the property. So that is, in a nutshell, is why this is before you tonight.
Okay.
Okay?
Thank you,
That
Shanley.
helps. Sure.
All right. Andrew, would you like to jump in and
Yeah,
explain what's
just
going
very
on?
briefly, my name is Andrew Hedrick. I'm a civil engineer from Gartley and Dorsey. This is Ed Hansen. He is the owner of the property. I'll be very brief. I think Shenley summed it up very well. I just wanted to point on the plan just so we could look. So we've made several minor changes, which I've kind of outlined in the packet, and Shenley and the planning office has approved. The one item that we're talking about is this area up on the hill here. So these are the original, we call them the D1 and D2 units. We essentially, the applicant decided he wanted to mirror those units and put the deck on the other side. And when that occurred, the placement of the building and foundations had to be adjusted. So we kind of slid those units over. And in doing so, to maintain 30 feet of separation between the buildings and the carport, we were forced to kind of push that carport, which is right here. We pushed that carport up about 40 feet from where it originally was placed. And then to gain access to that carport, we had to extend the road and the turnaround area up about 55 feet, a little bit further. We didn't get any closer to the property line. Actually, we're a little further away from the property line than where we were. We can see that this corner of the property is very tight. There is an existing, let me rephrase that, a previously approved vegetated buffer along this field area. This is all field in this area. And then we actually wrapped the corner up around the edge where it was a little sparse. Beyond that, where we show it now, there's a substantial amount of trees and vegetation in that place that far exceeds the buffer requirements in the ordinance. So we hadn't proposed to make any adjustments to the buffer. I think if you look at the buffer and the ordinance It indicates that if you have substantial trees that meet the requirements, a buffer is not required. Again, we can go on to get into the fact that the buffer was offered because this was a fielded area. It was directly abutting that, and we had proposed to put a massive septic field in that location. So kind of keeping good relations, we said, we'll screen that septic field so you don't have to look at that. We have since, we amended the plan, the subdivision was amended back in July, and we moved the septic field from this area all the way to the front to offer a better situation. The planning board reviewed and approved that in July. So at this point in time, that's just a field area, but there's still plans to put the buffer in there. And in our original packet, we detailed what plants and species were going to go in there, and it all exceeded the buffer requirements for that. So that's the long and the short, simply extending that. And all these changes that we have made, one of the things we've been watching closely is impervious area, because we're so close to the stormwater threshold. But making all the changes, making the adjustments, we were actually able to reduce the impervious area on the site by 144 square feet, just due to the adjustments in the roads and some of the parking areas and some of the unit areas around them got a little bit smaller due to the not needing walkways and whatnot. But I just wanted to give you a quick summary of what we had proposed to do out there, and glad to answer any questions.
All right. John, do you have questions?
I do, just a real quick one. Also in your submittal packet, there was a discussion of combining a couple of infiltration trenches. Where are those on the site?
Absolutely. So we have, there's two under drain soil filters is what they are. So those were previously approved. There's one that was to be located here, and then there was one that's located down by the entrance there. So they don't show well on the subdivision plan, but they do show on the site plan that we provided. There's some good pictures, and I have those up here if we want to look at exactly where they are. So what we did is we eliminated this soil filter and we moved it to the front to combine it.
Okay.
So the applicant wanted to kind of create that screening. I'm sure you've all seen kind of the hills that they've created. So they wanted to create the screening and so they could landscape along that and stop the noise. So we said, we can do that. Merge those together. We're still catching the same amount of stormwater. We're actually catching a little bit more than we did before, but it's still all treated in accordance to the standards.
Thank you.
Pat, do you have any questions?
Yeah, I had a question. So that vegetated buffer, would you be willing to extend that so it could help screen Mr. Daviday's lot?
In between us and him is really a forest. It's quite heavily vegetated.
Oh, it's a forest
Have to
already.
remove quite a lot of trees to create a vegetated buffer.
Oh, okay. If that's,
240 feet from the edge of the road to his property line, and it's all completely forested.
oh, okay,
So
all
it's this
right.
area right here that we're talking about. So from the edge of the road
Mhm.
to his property is 240 feet.
Okay.
And
got
there's
it.
no dwelling units on that side of the road.
No, there's not. It's
Now-
completely untouched. And actually, by moving that underdrain soil filter, we allowed that to be more naturally and maintained. Originally, we were going to have to clear half the woods out in that area to put that approved underdrain soil filter in that location. But we elected to kind of leave it natural, and we can preserve that buffer, and then we can move up front and combine them all there since we're already going to have to disturb that area. So it actually preserved another 100 feet of woods in that area.
And I know that this is kind of out of like off topic because we're not talking about what's going to happen in the future necessarily, but is that a potential site for building in the future?
We haven't decided. We're still moving boxes around the plan. We're seeing what works financially and feasibly and where units have to go. The site is challenging. The phase one has been very successful. Everybody likes, so there's a very good chance that we will be back for a second phase, but we're not sure where it's going to be and how it's going to all align.
Okay, and you wouldn't say that you're not going to build on that site?
I would hate to put any restriction on,
right.
unnecessarily on that.
Just asking for, you know.
We agreed to the original buffer as a courtesy to the neighbor. And because it was going to be a large clearance and a large leach field created in what is today an open field. It's still quite green between our properties. But I don't want to start a precedence that becomes uncontrollable. And my understanding is right now, we're not required to create buffers. It's not a commercial development. It's a residential development. And I just want to make sure that we all still understand the nature of the development and the nature of the zoning in relationship to our development. And we're not creating, by having agreed to that original accommodation, we're not suddenly creating a condition where every abutting property suddenly expects greenery. So, because it becomes really uncontrollable for us in terms of cost.
Right, well, I hear you, and you may say that it was an accommodation, it was also a condition placed on the development by the planning board, which is not just an agreement, it's a condition that we placed on the development. Now, I
And we're not-
recognize that it referred to when the septic installation was going to be there prior, and now we don't have that. But we do have an extension of the road and the driveway along the property line, and we do have the movement of a building, which is the carport, along that property line. And so I think there are some who are rightfully concerned that that buffer be extended, if at all possible, along that property line to better shield, I believe it's Mr. Travis's property. Now, I see the pictures, and I see that there's wood, and I understand Andrew's perspective that what is sitting there right now meets what's in the ordinance, but what is in the ordinance is not what's put as a condition on the property. We ask for additional assurances on the buffer between the properties, and that's just something that I would like to hear your feedback on, whether you're willing to extend that north up the property line to better shield Mr. Travis's property, and what you would propose to put there, because I have to be honest, I'm trying to remember, I know we talked at length some about the buffer and what you might be putting there. I also note that these pictures are taken, I see that we have deciduous and evergreens, and so in the wintertime, what is there may not be quite as prevalent between the properties. So I would like to just hear a little bit from you, Andrew, on those issues.
No, absolutely. So when we established the buffer in the field area, we followed the ordinance, which basically it clearly indicates the level of buffer requirements. And the ordinance says for every 100 feet, and again, let me preface this by saying this is for multifamily units. So it's not applicable to this development, but we offered that the owner agreed to let's add this to the plan. So based on that, we went back to the buffer requirements and how they describe a buffer in the ordinance. And it says for every 100 feet, you shall have 2 canopy trees or evergreen, 2 canopy, 4 understory trees, or 6 shrubs. So that's in a 100-foot section. There's only about a dozen trees, bushes, and shrubs. So in the picture you're looking at, where that exists is, if we look at picture 1, the existing buffer, that first picture I show you, there's probably 30 trees in about 80 feet. So we're 3 times the buffer requirements in that area.
Well, yeah, but that's, I'm sorry.
But you really can't
So-
jump in on the hearings.
So
Sorry.
the only way to add greenage or add buffers, for one, it's obviously very costly. What we'd have to do is we'd have to go in and start removing those trees. There's not substantial room. We couldn't just plant understory trees in there. We couldn't plant shrubs. We'd have to go in and start cutting all those trees down to reestablish a buffer that has more understory or more character. But we feel that if you actually look at the buffer requirements, it says where natural buffering does not exist. And that's like the second statement that it makes in that buffering requirement. Again, we're not required to, but right in that the zoning, 290A10, a 10A, it has the buffering requirements for multifamily units. And it says where natural buffering does not exist, we shall provide sufficient. So we're struggling on how we provide sufficient without removing existing trees, removing the natural buffer to kind of plant the new artificial one. And the field area is completely different because that's an open field. That's an easy thing. We can come along the edge. We can plant a buffer meeting your requirements, meeting your ordinance, and help screen that property boundary. But kind of around the corner or down another property line that there's already existing trees and buffers, they're there and they're natural for a reason.
Okay.
And we'd hate to
May
disturb
I
them.
just jump in real quick? So I'm just trying to get my bearings here. I'm looking at picture 1. Can you show me on the plans where that would be taken from on the property?
I sure can. So,
Is that basically on this corner
yep,
right
so
here?
this is the corner. You can almost see the corner on this lot line. So here's the house. There's about the corner of the property. It's actually back in the woods. But
Here,
that's
kind of?
Yep, it's sort of in the woods there. So
Yep.
this is the easier one to see. So that is if we're standing We're standing right here in the middle, looking
here,
right
looking
back
straight
towards
back
that.
there.
Yeah, so that's the gravel from that turnaround, and there's the house. The house is sitting right here, and the tennis court's right there up against the property line. So that's the house looking through the woods here. So we're looking right here,
Yeah.
and we're looking back that way.
And what's here?
Just natural, it just looks like this, the same thing. It just
Forested?
extends down, forested. Yep.
So where are pictures 3 and 4 taken?
Those are into the field area. So 3 and 4 is standing, looking on the edge of this road right here, standing and looking into the field area here. So picture 3, we're looking directly out into the field.
Is that the peak of his house right there?
That is
Visible?
the peak of his house, correct?
Right.
Yep. And as you can see, it's already well screened this time of year, but they're proposing the buffer that the applicant agreed to is going to add those 10, shrubs in that
Hedge
area,
type
the low
shrubs,
story, high
yeah.
story. So there's a bunch of trees that are going to go, actually, it's a few more than 10, the actual plan that they proposed.
Okay.
And that'll go in front of the existing screening. Because he's basically, like, all this is right on the property line. So he's cleared right to the property line on both sides. And those trees that are there now are right on the property line, because this is a tennis court, like 3 feet from that property line, essentially.
Yeah.
So we're going to come on this side on our property line, and we're going to add a 25-foot buffer in there and add, I think the planting plan is close to 15 or 20 trees between the shrubs that was originally approved and provided with the
So
packet.
this is 25 feet, this right here?
Yes, yep. The thickness is 25 feet.
25 feet thick.
Yeah, it's about, I think it's 100 feet long, 85 to 100 feet long. I have a scale if you want to.
Yeah. Okay, and there's, like, as we said right now, I mean, it's only now, but there's no development happening right now in this area.
No, nothing here. And then this is all natural. This looks very similar to the first picture we looked at. So you can see the field ends, and the field ends right here where this test pit is. Right at the corner here is where the field ends.
Right there?
Yeah, and then this is all natural woods.
Okay.
Yeah, I hate to interrupt, but I got a video of my view of the area in question. The
Yeah, I mean,
west side.
I'm sorry, it's just there's no public input at this point. So, all right,
And we're proposing to plant all along this and kind of wrap the corner there wherever we can find a pocket to
Right.
add and supplement that. So that whole corner will be protected and the entire length of that field will be
and,
protected.
and if you were asked to somehow find pockets in here, would that be something you'd be willing to consider?
I'm
I mean, I
I'm
hear-
not
I hear that
sure
you're
we
saying
could
it's hard
make,
to do.
yeah, you can see, if you look at that picture 1, looking back in there, I'm not sure how we could supplement that with additional plantings. The landscaper is going to want to come in there, remove those trees to ensure survivability of them. So it'd be really hard to find some pockets in there. I mean, maybe there's a few pockets they can do that. And I know that's Ed's goal anyways, ultimately, is to try to screen the property, the long term of this. But to be mandated to go in and plant some trees in there and then to have the town have to ensure they survive, and the landscape is going to design them. So we'd have to remove those trees that are already there to add and supplement beyond where we already have done that. And it just makes it a challenge.
All right, yeah, and I hear that, and I also, I recognize that the plans changed. And, you have a gentleman here who would love to give public input, but wasn't able to do it because he didn't know where it was going at the time. So he couldn't comment to that specific location. So that is a concern that I have, and I guess I'd be looking for some accommodation to screening if feasible. And so I'm not the landscape architect.
Could I suggest simply making it conditional that the buffer requirements will be maintained in accordance to the standard and the ordinance? So if we follow the ordinance and we have a certain amount of tree count, a number of bushes and shrubs already in that existing area, if we already exceed that, we're meeting the standard. So if you look at the ordinance, number 2, right in that section, it specifically says, if there's already screening, you don't have to plant new trees.
Right, I understand that. We are also entitled to go beyond the ordinance, correct?
You can to some extent, yes. I mean, you can do however you want to, but at the end of the day, I want to make sure that we present something that can be maintained and managed and properly watched by everybody so that we have something that everybody can be accounted for. So the code enforcement officer doesn't come out and say, your shrub died that you planted underneath the trees, and it dies, and then we're gonna have to go back and kind of remove some. So it makes it very gray and hard to manage properly unless it's very black and white. And to do that, I feel if you follow the ordinance that's already prepared, that has a very specific number of trees there, and we're in compliance with the ordinance, I would hate to kind of continue to extend this. And again, this is, we've offered this buffer as, trying to be cordial, to be neighborly, and we just don't want to be taken advantage of and continuing to have to extend this buffer, add more trees, add more of this. Next planning board meeting, if we're back, they say the trees aren't good enough, can you add more? And we're well beyond where the ordinance standards are, and we just want to make sure.
Right, I
That's
understand
very
your
clear.
position. Yeah, that's clear. I understand. Don, do you have anything else on this?
I don't have any more questions. I might have some comments.
Oh, yeah, I'm looking for questions for the applicant right now.
There's just
for-
one question I had. The road to be reclaimed, that's about, let's say, 10,000 square feet. That's that road that they're going to revegetate.
It's actually removed. I don't know if you've noticed, it's gone.
Oh, it is.
The road is gone, yes. So this entire road all the way up to this area is completely removed. It's been graded in. It's actually growing grass and it's stabilized. Well, it's got a little bit more stabilization needed, but it's all gone.
Until the existing house?
Yes, yeah, no, yep, it actually comes all the way up past, did you get? It's just a little beyond the house
And it
there,
will-
yep.
We're just waiting for the rough grading to complete around that house, the new house, and then we'll complete.
And they'll pull the
removal
rest
that
of it
road.
out. Yep,
Okay, all right.
so we've got 60% of it's gone. The one right up
And we-
front, though, it looks really nice.
And we planted 73 trees along the entrance, along the edge of the property near Jeff's property here. So we've done quite a bit of landscaping, a significant investment in,
Does look very nice.
Well, I should go see it. Okay.
I would say that I want to make clear from our position, we don't understand at this point that the buffer requirement applies to our property, that it is in the ordinance for multifamily residential, which this is not. This is not an apartment complex. So although, we believe that, that the existing forest exceeds the requirements of a buffer, we don't agree that buffering is required at this point for our whole property. So I'm not willing to go beyond that in any sort of commitment going forward. We kind of need to live with the requirements that were established at the outset of the project by the planning board and by the existing codes. So.
Okay. Anybody else have questions for the applicant?
Not at this point, no.
Okay. Discussion?
I might start us off just a little bit, and I do think that, from my perspective, the only landscape buffer that we should be talking about this evening is one that was included on the original plans. And I'm not sure, I see the change in the road, the change in the road length, and that would argue to me that, we could continue the existing vegetated buffer along that property line a little bit further. But, I look at the pictures of the forested area, and I'm sympathetic to the comments that, you can't throw in some shrubbery there and expect it to last. So I'm not sure that the board can play that productive of a role in trying to mediate between the neighbors. It's certainly my hope that they continue their conversations. And if the money that was initially going to be put into the vegetated buffer adjacent to the septic system that is no longer going to be there, if that money is spent around the corner in a way that helps the neighbor, I don't really want to try to craft a condition that says that necessarily. But if that happens in the field, that would be fine, in my opinion.
Mhm.
That's kind of where I'm sitting tonight.
Okay. Pat?
I feel the same as John, I'd say, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so it's kind of hard not being on the site, I'll be honest. And I know we don't want to keep delaying things here. But I'm inclined to think maybe we should walk, and I know that seems like a lot, but it's just, it's really, it's hard to get a real feel for what we're looking at from these plans. And if there was, if there was a way to, if you extend the road 55 feet and there's a way to extend that buffer, that same 55 feet. And I am definitely sympathetic to your concern that it looks like there's nowhere to plant anything, and that you feel that you've got a buffer that already meets the code. So I'm not saying this is what I'm doing. I'm just wondering if the planning board thinks it would be better to take a look, or if you're comfortable with what we see here on the plans, because I do feel a little bit for the neighbors in that they're here and they can't really speak to the actual issue, and we aren't seeing it from their house looking over at what's being done. And I understand that there's property rights involved. If I had a stronger feeling that there was sort of a meeting of the minds between the applicant and neighbors, I would feel less inclined to get involved. And so I'm not saying I'm doing anything here. I just want to hear what your thoughts are, Pat, and your thoughts are, John, on that possibility.
I would say if it's something we could do quickly, and I'm not sure where we have to make the decision as a go or not, but if it's something that we could do quickly, maybe tomorrow
Yeah,
or
can I?
Saturday.
I know you're not asking me a question, but I would like to state that there's been a considerable economic impact to us. We've been stopped for a month and a half from any new permits from the planning board, from the planning office. So we have crews waiting for work. We have a lot of significant impact. So further delays are really not welcome. If it's helpful in somehow to see this, if we could do it quickly, but I think then that would put us into another position of having to come back to another public forum or another meeting to make a decision, right? We'd have to be voted on in a public setting. So I don't know that we would resolve it in a day. It would be another 2 weeks or another 4 weeks or whatever.
Right. And again, sensitive to the time issues, but the reason why we're here at the time that we're here is because the plans were changed and then discovered, right? I mean.
No, they weren't discovered. I mean, we've been quite forward with the planning department on this. It's not, we weren't caught doing anything.
Yeah, I didn't mean it so much as surreptitious like that, but my understanding is that the road was placed before the plans were submitted. Is that not correct?
The road has not been placed yet. Has it been
It
placed?
has, so the procedure here is as we've adjusted things, I mean, as construction, you have contractors extending the road. We literally was trying to fit the buildings in, and we ended up extending the road where it needed to go while he was working that area in the field. I look at these as a minor field adjustment. I'm not sure, honestly, how we even get into having a planning board review a driveway extension by 55 feet. If this is a residential lot, you'd be able to put that driveway and parking wherever you needed to. So we're very, very aware of that. But extending that road 55 feet happened in the field due to the fact that we had a contractor excavating in that location. We decided to mirror those buildings because honestly, Ed and I stood on the site and he didn't like how we had it arranged and oriented, and we ended up mirroring the building and kind of shifting it over. So you had a nice view corridor of the mountains out there. And by doing that, it kind of pushed things down. So rather than stop everybody, they extended the road another 55 feet of gravel.
And then Andrew documented that in his report.
And we put it in the
Right, so,
report and
okay.
updated the town. I mean,
Right,
every
I just-
time I go to
yeah.
the site, there's an inspection report generated.
Right. I just wanted to be clear on the steps that happened here. It wasn't.
Right, we had these conversations back with the planning department in October.
Right, and I wasn't involved in those
Right,
discussions.
right.
I mean, I've been privy to some of the back and forth, but, I really am not trying to make a federal case of this. I guess what I would say is I would encourage the applicant to consider where they might meet the neighbors' desire for more screening.
I-
And take that to heart. And I know you're trying to be a good neighbor.
We are.
And I know you have property rights to say you could cut to here, you could cut to there. But, in the end here, you're likely going to be coming back for another application to build more houses. And you don't want to have unhappy neighbors all around you.
Yeah, we would love
and
to
I don't
have,
want to make the planning board drag out, do a walk, slow you guys down. But I understand, I'm not the landscape architect and I can't see where to plant shrubs. But if wintertime hits and you look at this and you say, man, it really is kind of too open. Can we do something about it? Because
so we would love to have happy neighbors, but at the end of the day, we're not required to. And at some point, we may say, we can't accommodate all the requests. We make
Right.
efforts, we try.
I understand, yeah.
But I would say that our challenge is much more difficult because our abutting neighbors have non-conforming properties. We have structures and development that go right up to the property lines on all of these neighbors. And there's a lot of history there, and I don't believe that the current owners of these properties did this, but it makes it much more difficult because they don't have any buffers on their side of the property line. So it puts all of the onus on us to create new buffers, I guess you'd say.
Right, but if they're non-conforming, they're also grandfathered in, right? And so, again, I don't like getting involved in neighbor disputes. It's literally one of the my least favorite things, and so that's my encouragement, I guess, and that doesn't come with the weight of a condition, but I'm inclined to agree with John and Pat that it looks difficult to provide additional screening by any kind of order that we could provide without having a landscape architect come in and us do a walk and all these things. I am sensitive to the concerns of the neighbors, and I'm hopeful that that you can make sure that when winter strikes, or if something should occur to you that, hey, this would be a great place to plant a couple of shrubs that would make my neighbors happy, I would encourage you to do so. You guys all set to just,
I'm ready for a motion if.
yeah, if you are,
in such a mood.
I am. I'm sorry, there's no more public comment. Yep.
Do I have one of these? Okay. So let me take a stab at a motion, if I may.
Yeah, we've got a couple determinations we need to make, right? You got that? Okay.
Yeah, I've grabbed that. And I echo your comments, Ethan, and I having looked at the plans, having glanced at the pertinent code sections and understanding that we might have a desire to mediate between neighbor discussions. In this particular case, I'm not sure we could play a constructive role. So I'm going to make a motion that, understanding that the town staff has determined that the proposed revisions in our packet require a review by the planning board. I'll make a finding that the proposed revision has altered the character of the originally approved subdivision plan, but that the proposal still meets the approval standards found in Chapter 235, Article 8, and a review of the criteria 30-A MRSA 4404. And basing our decision as to whether or not the proposed revisions meet the approval standards on the review criteria listed in Chapter 235, Article 8.
Right.
That the plans have been submitted as required for these revisions, that the appropriate supporting information has been submitted, and that the scope of our review is limited to these portions of the plan that are proposed to be changed and impacts of the effects of such changes. I'll make a motion that is required by Chapter 235, Article 12. The board's reviewed the application to extend and realign the end of North Haven Drive and other associated changes, and determines that the proposed revisions are found to not alter the character of the originally approved plan.
Okay. That was one long motion.
It was a lot
The
of like
motion was,
lead up
the
to
motion
it.
was great. The
It was-
motion was
the
great.
motion,
The lead up was great too. So do we have a second?
Second that.
All in favor? John?
Aye.
Pat?
Aye.
That's an aye from me. So moved. Um,
Was that Article 8, really?
well, we didn't do Article,
He's doing that next.
Article 8
There's
still.
two votes now.
Yeah, Article 8's still coming, and we will need to go down these criteria, but we can skip over most of them. The applicant has provided a pretty good
Right.
rundown.
All
From
right, I've been brushed back, so I'm going to let you.
Well, let's just do that real quick first, and then, because we want to have, review of the criteria, and so I'm going to go along with pretty much and make just a brief motion that per the applicant's own submission, 1 through 12 are not really, or there are no changes proposed that will affect those. And so I'll ask for a second on that motion.
Second.
And John,
Aye.
Pat,
Aye.
and that's an aye from me. So as to 13, 14, and 15, do we have anything we want to discuss on those? We've got freshwater wetlands. It looks like it increased the impact there.
Oh,
I guess
14, there's no
14 is also, you should be sort of shoehorned in, but we'll just leave it where it is. No changes to the brooks. And then stormwater, we have 2 under-drained soil filters. We heard about this in the application. Looks like it's technically been improved. Is that yours?
It absolutely has. You were
Yeah.
able to catch more water. We just consolidated them into one. And I did provide the supporting calculations and documentation associated with that.
Yep. And that's been reviewed by the staff, so, okay. Then we have 16 through 20 again, motion that those do not apply, no changes there. Do I get a second on that?
Second.
And a vote, Pat,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
and that's an aye from me. Okay, now, John, we just had to go through those, but I think we can
You're teeing me up.
tee you up.
All right, I'd like to make a motion that the board determines the proposed amendment to the plan meets all approval criteria contained within Chapter 235, Article 8 and 30A MRSA 4404, and finds that the application for an amendment to the Nord Haven Camden LLC subdivision as represented on the plan by Gartley and Dorsey Engineering and Surveying be approved.
That is a motion. Do we have a second?
I second that.
John,
Aye.
Pat?
Aye.
That's an aye from me. So moved. That concludes the review of the subdivision amendment, guys. Thanks for coming in. And I think the only thing we have next to do we have anything for next meeting, anything like that on the agenda?
Um,
I do have a plan for signatures.
Okay,
I have that here, one of them here. I don't have a black and white copy here. So I have a colored copy.
you know what's required on that there, Shanley? That's beyond my pay grade.
Yeah, you can sign.
You can sign the colored?
Sign the colored.
You're welcome. Yep.
He's going to record it for you.
Yep. Today is the 15th.
15. Yes. Bye. See you guys. Thanks for coming.
And we have to sign this in order.
Yeah.
There's
Well,